The whistle from the engine car sounded as Jarek felt the train begin to slow. The long journey from New York City to St. Paul was finally coming to a close. What seemed like almost a month of travel was actually less than a week. It seemed to Jarek that the train arrived later than it did because it was so dark outside the windows. He could tell it was a bitter temperature outside the comfort of the passenger car. Peering through the small window, the dark-haired young man could see steam rising from the manhole covers in the streets beyond the train rails. Small flakes of snow were coming down slowly from the sky. The snow drifting down, combined with the frosty air, gave Jarek a calming yet chilling feeling. He had felt so much unease over the past month, so it was refreshing to just sit and observe out the window as the train continued its arrival in this growing city along the Mississippi River. Jarek pulled out his pocket watch. There was ample time to find some dinner at a local establishment and still arrive at the O'Connell residence before going too late into the evening. As Jarek sat in the train car, the unease began to creep back into his thoughts. He traveled here on his own accord. However, the travel was significantly prodded by the letters he received requesting help. And his own intuition was nudging him to act upon the request. Jarek always knew he was different, and several of those close to him were aware he was unique. Even some strangers in New York were aware of his gifts because he had helped others when he could. Word must have spread about his abilities beyond New York. Sometimes people unknown to him would seek him out asking for his help, or he would be drawn to strangers who needed his gifts. Those strangers were always from New York, so when he began to sense something was off, and then 2 separate letters arrived, he knew something bigger was happening. The train came to a halt, and the passengers began to stand from their seats and grab their belongings. Jarek sat waiting for the other passengers to compile their belongings and exit the passenger car before getting up. Though he was anxious to get off the train and stretch his legs, he knew it wasn't proper as a younger man to barge in front of those older than him and the women traveling alone. Jarek secured his belongings once the car was nearly empty and moved to the train platform. The air felt brisk, with a slight breeze tunneling through the tall buildings in this growing downtown. There was a hint of moisture in the air, adding to the chill and creating some fog that gave shivers to people exiting the train. Clearly, many of the passengers were not prepared for the weather. Though Jarek had never been anywhere but the East Coast, he knew to dress appropriately. However, it was still a sharper sting to his face than he was anticipating. As he was walking into the train depot to ask for directions, he couldn't help but feel the energies surrounding him. He was getting feelings of happiness and excitement. Jarek had been to towns in his past that only felt dark and hopeless, especially during the Great War. So he had a sense of relief that this city seemed to have many good-natured people and minimal impact by dark entities. He knew not to take this for granted, as he knew there was something dark awaiting him in this city. St. Paul Union Depot was an immaculate structure, clearly not that old. It had nearly a dozen different train platforms of people coming and going from the bustling city. Thankfully, Jarek overheard someone say there was an establishment right inside the depot to eat some food. Above the door, when walking into the depot, he noticed a large clock with the time. The depot was crowded with people, just as much as outside on the platform. A grand Christmas tree, at least 20 feet tall, was at the center of the large open room. Garlands and elaborate ornaments adorned many of the doorways, windows, and ticket windows. A string ensemble playing familiar carols overshadowed the hustle and bustle of people. Jarek always appreciated this time of year. No matter what darkness came through the veil or entities tried to capitalize on the long, dark nights, he knew there was always hope and comfort in the season. Jarek walked up to the eatery and sat down at a small 2-person table. He removed his coat and hat and placed them on the back of his chair. He set his suitcase and satchel down on the floor before taking a seat. It was fairly busy, but a man younger than himself came over to greet him. "Good evening. Welcome to St. Paul Union Depot, sir. We have beef roast or creamed chicken as our entree options tonight.